Okay, we've got about 12, 13 minutes or so, which is a great opportunity to ask some general questions that a number of the panel might be able to help with. And so hoping we can get questions that apply to more than one person. So, is there anybody going to start off? Oh, right, one over there. We got a microphone.
Hi, very general question really.
Well, could you just say who you are?
Steve Martin from the Institute of Public Health.
Sure.
So, not just on the talks that we've heard today, but a lot of the big data stuff I've heard over the years is, I'm quite alarmed by the seeming deficiency of theory. So there seems to be a whole host of technological and analytical methods that have been grabbed, and it seems that we're just churning through the numbers without really knowing why we're putting the numbers in the hope that we can do a big, complex, essentially regression analysis, and with the hope that we fit a nice, clean line to a graph, without really addressing what's going into the model, why do we need the data. So yeah, just...
Okay, what about that response? Is it just a bag of tools that you just shove onto whatever data you've got coming along?
I don't quite know how to answer that actually, but I'll do my best. So is it just a big bag of tools? Well, to some extent these techniques do already exist, yes, but in our particular case, I think we aim in every project to work with to work with experts on the data, so that we're actually addressing issues that are really relevant for the data provider, for the problem holder. So in the case of the global public health alerting, we actually compared against ground truth as best it could be, and tried to compare our system against the best systems that were available there. So trying to take a sort of evidence-based and objective approach to this in our case. Yes.
Are there any other responses that anybody would like to make?
I like your question, and I think you hit a very sensitive point. My take on this is that I think we need to learn to work with uncontrolled studies. In the case of psychology, and I'm no expert there, but I worked with them for many years. They worked many years with control studies and very artificial settings. So the results we see in famous papers are often undergrads, or often limited numbers or artificial settings. Bringing it out to the public has limitations. Yes, we need to apply techniques and then make sense of the data the best way we can. Perhaps relating to smaller studies is one way to go. So this, I think I would advocate learning with uncontrolled studies is the general one general aspect.
Yeah, Tom.
I think that big data and the analysis of large sets of data present real challenges for the use of statistical theory. And I think it's all the more important that data and analysis isn't just about grinding through the data in a sense. There's always a danger if you use certain statistical techniques that the results don't mean a great deal. When people talk about big data, and this is partly a question, I suppose, to other people on the panel and back to the audience, I'm never quite sure what point of reference they have when they talk about big data. Is it about existing questions for which we now have a lot more data, so we need to know how to process it? Or when people talk about big data, is it that they are looking at very new and different kinds of questions? The simplest example I can think of that is if you're like searching for needles in haystacks, where there is vast amounts of data and you're trying to find out something very limited within that large amount of data. So this phrase big data, and when people use it, I'm never quite sure which of those two contexts, or perhaps both, they mean by the use of that phrase.
Are there any other comments?
I'll just make a quick point, which I think is we're wrestling with that, I think, in our own work, partially because we're not coming to it directly from a big data perspective in the first place. But for me, the fact that this data, however big it is a representation of something as opposed to the thing itself. In the social context is really, really important, and it includes and excludes in ways that all data has done in the past, in different ways though. But for us, that means that there is something to be gained from not, I think, over running the machine-based analysis of it, but trying to engage back with contextual knowledge in ways that you can generate hypotheses about what this might mean, or generate impossible insights and then further go off and analyze it. The richness of this data offers new opportunities to access a representation of social reality that can start another process of analysis, but in itself, it's dangerous to sort of just rely on the data alone and run it through a machine to get the answer, especially in the context of our data.
Yes, just a last remark. It's not only about data, so we have to start with very good research questions. So it's not doing data fishing just because we have all this immense data that we can do interesting things with it. We can have big data in the sense of large data sets, but the quality of the data is not enough to derive this rich insight. So it's important that the data reflect this social reality. And this data, it's big. I think in a way we use big data is not in terms of size. So I gave you an example where the size is hundreds of thousands of messages, but it doesn't need to be. It's big in the sense that it's unstructured and is messy and implies different techniques and different tools that you cannot use with more design research data.
So, big need for reality checks. Are there any questions that people have got?
So, Lydia Drumright from Medicine. So I think along those same lines, I will be using a lot of big data for those of you who know me or have a lot of big data almost at my grasp. And all these techniques have been used in epidemiology and other places that were discussed. But I think we just barely touched on big data. By the way, the definition is the 5 V's, of course, right? It's not big if it doesn't have volume, velocity, variation, veracity, nuclear. So that's what's that? Value. It's value. Okay. So it's not just a large data set. A large structured data set is actually not big data. A large, clean, structured data set is not big data. So in thinking about each of the areas that you work in, all of them will have to, just like stats, sort of rise to the challenge of big data, because I don't think any of them were designed on big data, with the exception of RFID type of stuff generates big data automatically, so there's probably always some processing. What do you think needs to be done in each of the areas in terms of methodology, and where are we with those in order to process?
Okay, yeah, need for methodology. Well, have you got it all sorted? Who wants to volunteer on that one? What would you like to have? What would you like to have at your disposal for your handling your data?
Yes, so I can talk from our research and the type of data that we have. So we have data in local languages, data that you cannot make sense without having a very sound background of the context of the language. And I'm talking about jokes, about metaphors, about T-slang, that the only way we can approach is using this type of contextual human language that as researchers we don't have access. So I think it's important that not starting with the data, but starting with the reality that relates to data and then go back to the reality that sometimes is missing, because we can be fascinated with the data and all these analyses and very outputs that come immediately, and we don't remember that it's important that these insights can be validated by the reality and by these contexts.
Okay, so inclusivity requires being able to interpret languages both local and casually used as well, colloquially, vernacular.
If I could just add just to that point, I mean, one of the things that I think we're trying to get at, which with the interface, which was not easy to see as an interface on a PowerPoint slide, but the lexicon, the informal slang lexicon, was not something that was there to be measured at the beginning of the project. It's something that was discovered through that contextual knowledge and the curation of the data in a certain way that allowed that contextual knowledge to be applied. And for me, some of the interesting methodological elements come into how do we structure that in a way that is credible and, I guess, meets certain criteria that would need to be met for it not to be a very arbitrary encounter between that contextual knowledge and the data in a way that then generates these lexicons or generates these insights. So it has to have certain qualities that I think are just starting to understand through practice rather than through any refined way.
Okay, that's a great question. What would you like to have?
Oh, I was thinking of the challenges we have in my field more than what I would like to have. I already have my dream. I already have my dream data set. The problem is that we've only managed to analyze one dimension of it because I tell you, in my field, I was listing down versions of mobile phones. Since we started, we had data coming from different versions of the phone. Therefore, this was all different, needs to be analyzed all different. Heterogeneity in terms of not just the version of the application, but the phone itself. Storage, we have an issue of now have all these arrays that would like to access the data, and how do you give access? And what's I won't go into that, but what's the computer science is going to making it usable, and then access to the data, pre-processing of the data to make it useful. We've only processed only the accelerometer, and I can go on. And this is, I think, because our data is a bit anomalous in a way. It's a bit new, and we are encountering all that. In terms of more traditional probably data sets, I guess you're still facing the fact that I think people are still building libraries and access and friendly databases that a non-computer scientist can use. I'm not an expert there, but I think there is a challenge there. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Any other suggestions? What would you love? What would you love?
Sometimes I like less data.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Yeah. No, for methods, what would you really like to be able to do with this stuff?
Well, one remark that I think I would make is that I alluded to the spatial statistical methods that lie behind a lot of the analyses of geographical, epidemiological data, and they are distinctly challenged when the data sets get large. Many of the methods, the software, really can't cope with geography, if you like, within the way the statistics work. I was at a conference about a month ago in the US where the question I got at the end was, well, okay, this method is very interesting, but how large a set of data can you work with? Are we talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands? It's all about big data these days, at least that's the way it's seen. And I said, well, actually, once you get beyond 1,000 or so, if you're really modeling the spatial structure, you can hit some real difficulties. So the short answer to your question is I don't know. I think it's a real challenge for many of the, if you like, spatial methods to go with it. I go one step back. I go back to the data in the first place. Because one of the challenges working with, for example, global data is the twin issues of consistency and completeness. The fact that it really is important that if you're going to bring together data from many different parts of the world, you need to be sure that the quality is comparable, that the records are complete and consistent, because otherwise many of the results you may get out aren't artifacts of the data that you think is comparable but may not be. So I think there are some big challenges there for those who talk about big data, but when they talk about big data, they mean global sets of data, for example. Obviously not all cases.
Can I pass it back to Nigel? Your data is very disparate, it's coming from all sorts of places, very different qualities. Do you think you can just bung it together?
No, I'm sure we can. I'm sure we can. And I think, I mean, I won't repeat what the last speaker said, but yeah, I mean, I think understanding the biases inherent in the data are very crucial, particularly for news data. And we did a little bit of work on this, looking at the number of news reports we were getting per head of population across the different diseases, and of course we found out huge differences around the globe. Obviously, countries which don't have many news reporters in them because of political considerations, others where simply the internet hasn't penetrated quite so much. I think maybe on a side issue of data, I think. I mean, for us, I spoke about 3 types of data. One was news, one was the biomedical literature, the other one was social media. And I think each of these has specific issues around them. So do we have enough data? Probably not, because the access to these different types of data is different in each case. So we're lucky in this country with regards to recent legislation. I think there was a report called the Hargreaves Report, which basically allowed us the right to mine anything we have access to, the copyright access to in this country. So that means we can mine the biomedical literature quite easily. If we want to mine social media, well, that's more of a grey zone. I think the ethics of that are currently down to the terms of service, but there's a bigger issue there with what does the person who's writing this message expect? How do they expect their data to be used?
So I can't resist putting my own bit in. And the other thing is people might change the style they use social media. People, sending messages, oh, I feel a bit ill this morning. It might just go out of fashion, I hope, to deliver that sort of message. Maybe it will.
Yes. So I mean, I think this is all open to study. The last one, of course, was the patient records, which is another huge area. So yeah, I'll finish up there.
Okay,
How
thank
do
you.
you cope with the fact that sick now in school?
It's a really interesting issue. We're dealing with it as a translation problem.
Okay. With that, I'd really like to thank the panel very much for a great